The cantina was dark and smoky, filled with the usual mix of traders, smugglers, and drifters who made Nexus Prime their temporary home. In the far corner, away from the crowd, sat a figure that made even the toughest spacers nervous. HFY was 7 feet tall with 4 powerful arms and skin like gray metal. His kind, the Zephyrians, were known across the galaxy as unstoppable warriors who conquered worlds for fun. But HFY was not the same warrior he used to be. His hands shook as he lifted his drink to his mouth. The simple act of holding a glass had become difficult for him. Other customers in the cantina kept their distance, whispering to each other about the strange behavior of the once mighty Zephyrian. The drink burned as it went down his throat, but HFY barely felt it. His mind was somewhere else, lost in memories he could not escape. 3 years had passed since the war, but for him, it felt like yesterday. The screams, the endless fighting, the faces of those small pink creatures that had broken his spirit completely. A shadow fell across his table. HFY looked up to see Vexti, a slim blue-skinned female with silver eyes that seemed to see everything. She was an information broker who sold jobs to anyone with the right skills and the wrong morals. Normally, HFY would have been happy to see her. She always had good work that paid well. "You look terrible," Vexti said as she sat down across from him. Her voice was smooth like silk, but there was concern in her silver eyes. "When was the last time you slept?" HFY did not answer. Sleep was when the nightmares came. Sleep was when he could hear their voices calling out in the dark. Speaking in that strange language, it still made his blood run cold. Sleep was when he remembered the way they moved, like pack animals hunting together. "I have work for you," Vexti continued, placing a small data pad on the table between them. "Good money. Very good money. The client specifically asked for warriors with experience fighting." She paused, choosing her words carefully. HFY noticed the pause and felt something cold crawl up his spine. He knew what she was going to say before the words left her mouth. "Fighting humans," she finished quietly. The glass in HFY's hand exploded. The sound of breaking glass filled the cantina as purple liquid splashed across the table. Every conversation stopped. Every eye turned to look at their corner. HFY was on his feet, his forearms spread wide, his breathing fast and shallow. "No," he said, his voice rough like grinding stone. "Never again. I will never fight them again." Vexti held up her hands in a calming gesture, but HFY was no longer seeing her. He was seeing something else, something that existed only in his damaged mind. The cantina faded away, replaced by images of a blue world with white clouds. Earth, the planet where everything had gone wrong. "HFY, calm down," Vexti said, but her voice sounded far away. "It's just a job. Good pay. Easy work." "Easy?" HFY laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. It was the laugh of someone whose mind had been broken and badly repaired. "You think fighting humans is easy? You know nothing. Nothing." His voice grew louder with each word. Other customers began moving toward the exits, sensing that something bad was about to happen. The bartender, a large green creature with 6 arms, reached under the bar for his weapon. "They never stop," HFY continued, his eyes wild and unfocused. "They never sleep. They never quit. You kill one and 10 more take its place. You corner them and they disappear like smoke. You think you have won, and then they come for you in the dark." He grabbed the table with all 4 hands and lifted it over his head. The metal groaned under the pressure of his grip. Vexti scrambled backward, her silver eyes wide with fear. "They are not like us," HFY shouted. "They are pack hunters. Death machines that look like soft pink children. They smile at you with their tiny teeth, and then they rip your throat out." The table flew across the room, smashing into the wall with a crash that shook the entire cantina. Bottles fell from shelves and shattered on the floor. The few remaining customers ran for the doors, pushing and shoving to get away from the mad Zephyrian. Kethver stood in the middle of the destruction, breathing hard, his body covered in sweat. For a moment, he was back on Earth, surrounded by enemies who fought like demons and never gave up. He could smell the smoke and blood. He could hear their voices calling to each other in the darkness. Then the stun blast hit him. The security forces of FN Nexus Prime were professionals who knew how to handle dangerous situations. 3 officers in black armor had entered the cantina while Kethvar was lost in his memories. They did not try to talk to him or reason with him. They simply fired their stun weapons and watched him fall dot as Kethvar collapsed to the floor, his body twitching from the electrical charge. He could hear the officers talking to each other. "Another one," the first officer said, shaking his head. "That's the 3rd Zephyrian this month." "War does things to people," the second officer replied. "Even to warriors like them." "What war?" the third officer asked. He was younger than the others and had not been on Nexus Prime very long. The first officer looked down at Kethver's unconscious form with something that might have been pity. "The human war. 3 years ago, the Zephyrian Empire tried to conquer Earth. They sent their best warriors, their finest ships, their most advanced weapons." "What happened?" the young officer asked. "They lost," the second officer said simply. "The mighty Zephyrian Empire, conquerors of 100 worlds, lost to a bunch of primitives who had barely figured out how to leave their own planet." The young officer looked confused. "How is that possible?" The first officer bent down and checked Kethver's pulse. "Still alive, just unconscious. Nobody knows for sure. The Empire keeps the details classified. But the warriors who came back, the few who survived, they all have the same look. The same broken expression, like they saw something that should not exist." They lifted Kethver's heavy body and carried him toward the exit. As they walked, the first officer continued talking. "The official reports say it was a tactical withdrawal, a temporary setback. But look at him. Look at all of them. Does that look like the face of someone who withdrew tactically?" Vexti watched from behind an overturned chair as they took Kethver away. Her datapad still lay on the floor where she had dropped it, the job offer glowing on its small screen. A simple mission, good pay. All they needed was someone with experience. Fighting humans. She picked up the pad and deleted the file. Some jobs were not worth the money, no matter how good the pay was. Whatever had happened on Earth, whatever the humans had done to break an entire generation of Zephyrian warriors, she wanted no part of it. The cantina was quiet now, except for the sound of the cleaning robots beginning their work. Outside, the lights of Nexus Prime twinkled like stars, and somewhere in the medical facility, Kethver would wake up to face another day of memories he could not escape. The medical facility on Nexus Prime was clean and white, designed to help beings from across the galaxy heal their bodies and minds. Kethver sat in a comfortable chair that had been specially made for his large frame. Across from him sat Dr. Yulanas, a kind female with pale skin and large eyes that seemed to glow with inner light. Her people, the Altarians, were known for their healing abilities and gentle nature. "Tell me about Earth," Dr. Yulanas said in her soft voice. She held a small device that would record their session. "What do you remember about the beginning?" Kethver closed his eyes and tried to push the memories away, but they came flooding back anyway. They always did. The doctor had given him medicine to help him remember without going crazy, but it still hurt to think about those days. "It was supposed to be easy," he said finally. His voice was quiet, like he was talking to himself. "The intelligence reports. said humans were weak. They had simple weapons and basic technology. Class 3 civilization, barely worth our time. Dr. Ulanaz nodded and made notes on her datapad. What made the Empire decide to invade? Resources, Kethva replied. Earth had everything we needed. Water, metals, good soil for growing food. And the humans looked harmless. They spent most of their time making art and music instead of weapons. They talked about peace and love and working together. He opened his eyes and looked at the doctor. We thought they were soft. We thought they would surrender after the first attack. The memory came back to him clearly now, helped by the doctor's medicine. He could see the great war room of the Zephyrian command ship, filled with his fellow warriors studying maps of Earth. War leader Vekman had stood before a large screen showing images of human cities. Look at them, Vekman had said, pointing at pictures of humans walking in parks and playing with their children. They have no armor, no weapons, no fighting spirit. This will be over in one day. Kethver had believed him. They all had. The Zephyrian Empire had conquered over 200 worlds. They were the greatest warriors in the galaxy. Humans were just another weak species that would bow down to their superior strength. The first day went exactly as planned, Kethver continued, his voice growing stronger as the memories flowed. We dropped from orbit in our assault ships. Thousands of warriors landed in their major cities. New York, London, Beijing, Moscow, Tokyo, all the important places. Dr. Ulanaz leaned forward slightly. What happened when you landed? Chaos, Kethver said with a bitter smile. The humans ran screaming. Their military tried to fight us, but their weapons could barely scratch our armor. Their bullets bounced off our shields like rain. We destroyed their tanks and aircraft in minutes. He paused, remembering the feeling of victory that had filled him that first day. The humans had seemed so helpless, so weak. Many of them had. Simply stood and stared as the Zephyrian warriors marched through their streets. By sunset of the first day, we controlled every major city on Earth, he continued. The human governments were sending surrender messages. Everything was going according to plan. But something changed, Dr. Ulanaz said gently. Kethver nodded slowly. The second day was when we learned the truth about humans. The memory shifted, and now he was remembering his deployment to a small human settlement in a place called Colorado. His unit had been sent to eliminate any remaining resistance in the rural areas. It should have been simple work, cleaning up the last few humans, who were too stubborn to surrender. My unit was sent to a small town in the mountains, Kethver said. Maybe 200 humans lived there. Farmers, teachers, mechanics. Simple people with simple lives. We expected to be done in an hour. Dr. Ulanaz waited patiently as Kethvar gathered his thoughts. The memories were getting harder now, more painful. The town was empty when we arrived, he continued. All the buildings were abandoned. We thought the humans had run away into the hills. War leader Vekman ordered us to search the area and eliminate any survivors. That was when they had met Jake Morrison. Kethver could still see the human clearly. In his mind, Morrison was not a large man by human standards, maybe 6 feet tall with brown hair and green eyes. He wore simple clothes and carried an old rifle that looked like it belonged in a museum. But there was something in his eyes that should have warned them. The first human we found was a former soldier named Jake Morrison, Kethver said. He came out of the trees with his hands up, like he wanted to surrender. Vekman was pleased. He thought this would be easy. But Morrison had not surrendered. Instead, he had started talking. He spoke in broken Zephyrian, words he had clearly learned just for this moment. Welcome to Earth, Morrison had said with a smile that did not reach his eyes. We have been waiting for you. Then he had dropped a small device at his feet and disappeared back into the trees, faster than any human, should have been able to move. The explosion had killed 3 Zephyrian warriors instantly. That was our first lesson about humans. Kethver sighed, his voice growing dark. They do not fight fair. They do not follow the rules of war. They use tricks and traps and lies. Dr. Yulinaz made more notes. What happened after the explosion? We tried to hunt him down, but he was not alone. There were others with him. A female teacher named Lisa Carter, who could shoot better than our best snipers. A mechanic called Tony Rodriguez, who knew how to make bombs from farming equipment. Even their young ones fought us. A girl named Amy Johnson, barely old enough to be a warrior, but she moved through their buildings like a ghost. The memory was getting clearer now, more detailed. Kethver could remember the frustration of trying to fight an enemy that would not stand still and face them properly. The humans used the land itself as a weapon, hiding in caves and tunnels, attacking from unexpected directions. They knew their world better than we did, he said. Every hill, every tree, every building. They had grown up there, lived there their whole lives. We were strangers fighting on their home ground. But it was more than just knowing the territory. The humans fought with a desperation and creativity that the Zephyrians had never encountered before. They turned farm tools into weapons, used their own vehicles as bombs, and seemed to have no limit to their imagination when it came to killing. How long did the fighting last in your area? Dr. Yulinaz asked. Kethver was quiet for a long moment. 47 days, he said finally. 47 days of constant fighting. We never had a moment of peace. They attacked us during the day and at night. When we destroyed one group, another would appear. When we captured their weapons, they made new ones. The doctor looked surprised. 47 days? For one small town? One small town, Kethver repeated. 200 humans. And they held off a full Zephyrian assault unit for 47 days. He could see that Dr. Yulinaz was beginning to understand. This was not the story of a normal military defeat. This was something else entirely. That was when we began to realize. Kethver said that we had made a terrible mistake about humans. Dr. Yulinaz watched as Kethver's hands began to shake again. The medicine was wearing off, and the memories were becoming harder for him to handle. But she needed to know more. The Galactic Council was depending on her report to understand what had really happened on Earth. Tell me about the mining complex, she said gently. Your file mentions a 47-hour siege. Kethver's eyes went wide. He gripped the arms of his chair so hard that the metal began to bend under his fingers. How do you know about that? It was in your military record, Dr. Yulinaz replied. But there are no details. Just that your unit was trapped for almost 2 days. Kethver closed his eyes and took several deep breaths. This was the hardest memory of all, the one that had broken his mind completely. But the doctor's medicine helped him speak, even when he did not want to. By the 30th day, we had learned. To hate them, he said quietly. These humans who would not die, who would not surrender. War leader Thekmon was growing desperate. We had lost half our unit to their traps and ambushes. The memory came flooding back. Kethver could see the abandoned mining complex where Morrison's group had made their final stand. It was built into the side of a mountain, with tunnels going deep underground. The perfect place for the humans to use their guerrilla tactics. We had tracked them to an old mining site, Kethver continued. Intelligence said there were maybe 20 humans inside. Thekmon decided to end it once and for all. He brought our entire remaining force, 43 warriors, to crush them. Dr. Yil_Nas made notes on her pad. What was your plan? Standard. Assault doctrine, Kethver replied. Surround the complex, cut off all escape routes, then move in with overwhelming force. It should have taken maybe 2 hours, But Jake Morrison had other ideas. The humans had spent weeks preparing the mining complex for this final battle. They had studied Zephyrian tactics, learned their weaknesses, and prepared surprises that no warrior training could have prepared them for. "We moved in at dawn," Kefvar said, his voice growing distant as he relived the memory. The complex seemed quiet, almost empty. Too quiet. That should have been their first warning. In all their weeks of fighting, the humans had never been quiet. They were always moving, always making noise, always letting the Zephyrians know they were there. But this time was different. Lisa Carter had positioned herself in the main tower, Kefvar continued. The human female who used to teach children. She had learned to shoot during our war, and she was better than any sniper in our army. The first shot had taken out their communications operator. One bullet, perfectly placed, and suddenly the Zephyrian unit could not talk to their command ship. They were on their own. Tony Rodriguez had turned the mining equipment into weapons. Kefvar said, "Explosive charges hidden in the tunnels, rock crushers that could be triggered remotely, conveyor belts that became traps. Everything we touched was dangerous." But it was Amy Johnson who had truly terrified them. A young human female moved through the complex like she was part of the building itself. She appeared where no one should have been able to go, struck, without warning, then vanished before they could respond. The girl was everywhere and nowhere, Kefvar said, his voice filled with remembered fear. She knew every pipe, every air vent, every hidden passage. We would clear a room, and she would attack from behind. We would guard a tunnel, and she would appear from above. Dr. Ulanaz leaned forward. "How long did this continue?" "Hours," Kefvar replied. "Hour after hour of constant fighting. Every step forward cost us warriors. Every room we entered was a trap. And always Morrison was there, coordinating their defense like he had been born for war." That was when Kefvar had begun to understand the truth about humans. They were not the peaceful, artistic species the intelligence reports had described. They were something else entirely, something that had been hiding behind smiles and kind words. They fought like they had been doing it their whole lives, he said. Not like civilians who had learned to fight during our invasion. Like soldiers who had been waiting for this war to begin. The siege had lasted through the day and into the night. Zephyrian warriors needed rest, needed time to recover between battles. But the humans seemed to have no such limitations. When one grew tired, another took their place. They worked in shifts, maintaining constant pressure. We realized they were not going to surrender, Kefvar said. Ever. They would rather die than give up. So Vekman made a decision that haunts me still. War leader Vekman had ordered the use of nerve gas. It was against galactic law to use chemical weapons against civilian populations, but he no longer cared about laws. He just wanted the humans to stop fighting. We pumped poison gas into the tunnels, Kefvar said, his voice filled with shame. Enough to kill every living thing in the complex. We thought it was over, but Jake Morrison had planned for this too. They had gas masks, Kefvar continued, his voice growing quieter. Old mining equipment that filtered the air. And they had food and water stored in the deepest tunnels. They sealed themselves underground and waited. Dr. Ulanaz looked shocked. They stayed in the poisoned tunnels? For 3 days, Kefvar replied. 3 days in darkness, breathing through old filters, eating stored food, waiting for the gas to clear. We thought we had won. We thought they were finally dead. But on the 4th day, Morrison's group had emerged from the tunnels like ghosts rising from their graves. They came out behind Zephyrian lines, moving through passages no one knew existed. They struck without warning. In the early morning hours, when the Zephyrian guards were least alert, They killed Vecmon while he slept, Kethver said. Cut his throat with a knife made from mining equipment. And they left a message written in his blood on the wall of his command post. Dr. Ulanaz waited for him to continue, but Kethver had stopped talking. His eyes were staring at something only he could see. What did the message say? She asked finally. Kethver's voice was barely a whisper. We can do this forever. Can you? Those words had broken something in every surviving Zephyrian warrior. They realized that they were not fighting soldiers or even desperate civilians. They were fighting something that simply would not stop, could not be broken, refused to give up no matter what was done to them. That was when we understood, Kethver said. Humans are not like other species. They do not fight for territory, or resources or glory. They fight because fighting is what they are. War is in their blood, in their bones, in their souls. He looked at Dr. Ulanaz with eyes that had seen too much. We thought we were predators coming to hunt prey. But we were wrong. We were the prey. We had always been the prey. The room was quiet except for the sound of Kethver's heavy breathing. Outside, the lights of Nexus Prime continued to twinkle. But inside the medical facility, two beings sat in the darkness of memory, trying to understand how an empire of warriors had been broken by a species that called itself peaceful. Dr. Ulanaz could see that Kethvar was reaching his limit. The big warrior was sweating despite the cool air in the room, and his forehands kept clenching into fists. But there was one more memory she needed him to face, the final piece of the puzzle that would help the Galactic Council understand what had really happened on Earth. Tell me about the withdrawal, she said softly. Your last day on Earth? Kethver was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. It was not a withdrawal. It was a retreat. The mighty Zephyrian Empire, conquerors of 200 worlds, running away from a planet full of primitives. The memory was different from the others. Clearer, more painful, but also tinged with a strange kind of respect that Kethver had never felt for an enemy before. Ceasefire came from high command, he said. Not because we had won, but because we were losing badly. Every day brought reports of more units destroyed, more warriors broken, more resources wasted. The Empire was bleeding credits and soldiers for a war that should have lasted one day. Dr. Elena's made notes carefully. This was the information the Council needed most. How long had the war lasted by then? 4 months, Kethve replied. 4 months of constant fighting across the entire planet. And the humans were getting stronger, not weaker. They were learning from us, copying our technology, improving their weapons every single day. That was what had terrified the Zephyrian. Command most of all. In every other conquest, the enemy had grown weaker as the war continued. Their resources ran out, their spirits broke, their resistance collapsed. But humans seemed to feed on conflict like it was food for their souls. My final mission was extraction, Kethver continued. I was ordered to return to the landing zone. In Colorado, where my unit had first deployed, Command wanted all surviving warriors off the planet within 24 hours. The landing zone was different from how he remembered it. 4 months of war had changed everything. The trees were scarred by plasma fire, the ground was torn up by explosions, and the air still smelled of smoke and death. But there were other changes too, ones that made Kethver's blood run cold. The humans had built things, he said. Structures that had not been there when we arrived. Defensive positions, communication towers, weapons platforms. All made from our own technology, mixed with theirs. Dr. Ulanaz looked up from her notes. They were reverse engineering Zephyrian equipment? Faster than our own engineers, Kethve replied with bitter admiration. They took apart our weapons, studied our armor, learned how our ships worked. and they made improvements, better designs than what we had brought to their world. That should have been impossible. Zephyrian technology was centuries ahead of human science. But somehow, these primitive creatures had not only understood it, they had made it better. As I waited for the transport ship, Kethvar continued, I saw him approaching across the landing zone. Jake Morrison, walking alone under a white flag. The human looked different from their first meeting. Older, scarred, wearing armor made from Zephyrian metal and human steel. But his green eyes were the same, still filled with that terrible intelligence. That had made him so dangerous. He came to talk? Dr. Yelenaz asked. To say goodbye, Kethvar replied, and to deliver a message. Morrison had walked right up to Kethvar with no fear at all. This human who had killed so many Zephyrian warriors, who had turned a peaceful mountain town into a fortress, who had broken the spirit of an entire invasion force. He carried no weapons, showed no hostility. He simply wanted to talk. You fought well, Morrison had said in broken Zephyrian. His accent was terrible, but Kethvar could understand every word. Your people are strong warriors. We respect strength. Kethvar had not known how to respond. In 4 months of war, no human had ever spoken to him with anything but hatred or fear. But Morrison sounded almost friendly, like they were old soldiers sharing drinks instead of enemies saying farewell. Why? Kethvar had asked. Why did you fight so hard? We could have given you good lives under the Empire. Peace, prosperity, order. Morrison had smiled at that, the same smile that had appeared on his face just before he dropped that first bomb all those months ago. Because this is what we do, he had said simply. This is what we are. Then Morrison had handed him something that made Kethvar's hearts stop beating. Data chips containing formal documents written in multiple galactic languages, applications and treaties, and requests for membership. What is this? Kethvar had asked. Our application to join the Galactic Council, Morrison had replied. Not as a conquered species, but as equals. As a civilization that has proven itself worthy of respect. Dr. Yelenaz leaned forward in her chair. They applied for council membership during the war? While we were still fighting them, Kethvar confirmed. They were planning for peace even as they were killing our warriors, thinking about diplomacy while they were setting traps for our soldiers. But Morrison had not been finished. He had one more revelation that would haunt Kethvar for the rest of his life. This was not even a real war for us, Morrison had said, his green eyes looking directly into Kethvar's own. This was practice, training. We have been fighting each other for 10,000 years. Every conflict, every battle, every war in our history was preparation for the day when someone like you would come. Kethvar had stared at the human in shock. Practice? We knew this day would come, Morrison had continued. The day when aliens would try to conquer us, so we prepared. Every human child learns about war in school. Every adult knows how to fight. Every city has plans for invasion. We have been getting ready for you our entire existence as a species. The transport ship had arrived then, but Kethvar barely noticed. His mind was reeling from Morrison's words. Everything they had thought about humans was wrong. They were not peaceful artists who had been forced to fight. They were warriors who had been pretending to be peaceful. He told me one last thing before I left, Kethvar said, his voice hollow with memory. He said that humans had never fought a species that could truly challenge them, that we were the first enemy they had faced who was actually dangerous, and that they were grateful for the experience. Dr. Yelenaz set down her datapad. Grateful? Because it had made them better, Kethvar replied. Stronger, more ready for whatever was coming next. As the transport ship had lifted off from Earth's surface, Kethvar had looked down at the planet through the viewports. What he saw there had completed his mental breakdown. The cities were already rebuilding, he said. Bigger than before, stronger than before. They were using everything they had learned from us to improve their world, and there were ships in orbit. Human ships built with our technology and theirs combined. The final insult had come as they reached the edge of Earth's solar system. Human vessels had escorted them out, not to make sure they left, but to show them what they had accomplished in just 4 months of war. They had built a fleet, Kethver said. While fighting us on the ground, they were building spaceships in orbit, preparing to take their war to the stars if we did not leave voluntarily. Dr. Yelenaz closed her files and looked at the broken warrior sitting across from her. What did you learn from all this? Kethver was quiet for a moment, then spoke the words that had echoed in his mind every day since leaving Earth. We learned that we are not the apex predators of the galaxy, he said finally. We never were. We were just the first ones the humans decided to meet. Outside the medical facility, ships came and went from Nexus Prime's busy spaceport. Among them were sleek vessels with unfamiliar designs, bearing the flag of a new species that had recently joined the Galactic Council. The ships were elegant and peaceful-looking, crewed by beings who smiled and spoke of art and culture and cooperation. But Kethver knew the truth about those ships and the creatures who flew them. Behind their smiles and kind words was something that no empire in galactic history had ever truly faced before. Something that had been preparing for war since before they could even reach the stars. The humans had arrived.